Hello, Empower Nation. Welcome to Empower Her Money podcast. I am your host, Angela Duncan. Today's episode is sponsored by freemoneytipsbook.com. freemoneytipsbook.com. Make sure you head to that website and download your free ebook, 7 Unshakable Money Tips. On today's podcast, I am interviewing Nataly Rodriguez and Jennifer Romanello, two powerhouse attorneys, and we are going to discuss what to avoid in your estate planning and also talk about probate. So welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you so much for having us.
Awesome. So why don't we start with Jennifer? Why don't you talk a little bit about your story and how you got to become a powerhouse attorney?
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, we really appreciate you having us. So Nataly and I actually, we have very similar beginnings. We met in high school. So we actually have known each other for over a decade now. And then we ended up going to college together. We went to the University of Central Florida where we roomed, and we had always kind of talked about this idea of starting a law firm together because we both had the mentality of going to law school. We wanted to be attorneys. And we just didn't know exactly what type of attorney we wanted to be yet, but we knew we wanted to do it possibly together. And then, fast forward, we each did our own law schools. I actually went up to Washington, D.C. I went to the George Washington University Law School, which absolutely loved. It was such a dream living in, D.C. for a while. And then ultimately missed South Florida, home, born and raised down here in Broward County. And so then I moved back, started working actually in local government. I took a stint because I was doing family law at first. And that's where I was introduced to estate planning and probate, and where I ultimately loved those areas. But decided to take a little, detour, did some local government work, which was very cool and interesting. But ultimately, it was 2020, and Nataly, when she tells you hers, but part of the Great Resignation of 2020, deciding that we wanted to, make our own lives, have more control over our work-life balance, and we both, with our backgrounds in these areas, decided that we wanted to give it a shot. So come January 2021, we kicked off Romanello and Rodriguez Law, estate planning probate law firm, and there's no turning back. It has been the best decision that we ever made, and yeah, and we're happy with what we're doing. That's the goal, is actually like what we're doing versus other areas that just weren't as fulfilling.
Yeah, awesome. Nataly, do you want to add to your story too?
Yeah. So you heard how we met. So I went to the University of Florida for law school. So I was in Gainesville for 3 years. Did my estate planning certificate there and knew that this was the area of law that I was really loving. Worked for a while in that area after graduating, and then I decided I wanted to be a litigator. And so that was not the right decision that I needed to have made at that point in time, but it did teach me a lot. And I've used a lot of that experience in owning our own law firm. But like Jennifer mentioned, once 2020 came, we were both pretty unhappy in our respective careers that we'd chosen at that point. And so we decided to take the leap. At that point, we didn't have, a mortgage and kids and things to really worry about. So we thought that it was the time to bet on us. And now going into year 4 soon, we haven't looked back. Yeah,
I like that. So it's kind of like sometimes COVID helps prepare us to, our next chapter and something that's bigger and better for us. So I like hearing the success stories. Talk a little bit about the bar exam. I've heard some crazy stories. Some people pass right away. Some people have anxiety and end up in the hospital. How did you guys prepare to make sure you're going to pass that, first time around, hopefully?
I actually gave myself a stress fever 3 days before. I had a stress fever. It was so daunting. And
it was, I think my mom, honestly, at the time I was living with her, studying, because I just didn't want to have any distractions. And I think that poor woman took on more of the stress than she would come home so worried about, what mental state I was in. But it's tough. It's definitely not for the weak of heart, but
it's a long program. So
I haven't thought about the bar in a minute.
I remember actually, so they usually you pick a program to study. And I used Themis. That was the program that I was using. And it started like the week before we even graduated.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember
this giant package at your door.
A huge box of so many books. And it's you're supposed to learn them all over in what, like a month, 2 months or something like
summer.
that?
You have summer.
The summer until July. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, I have to start before graduation. And then like you graduate and you go back the next day to study. And it was a crazy time. Definitely, like you said, not for the weak of heart, but I mean, worthwhile. Absolutely.
Any best tips for, if someone else is about to go through that?
Yes.
Earplugs for me. I use earplugs whenever, actually in all of my law school exams, I used earplugs because I didn't like hearing other people type. I didn't like hearing anything like that. That's like just those little simple tip, but also like breathe, relax, have confidence and faith in yourself that you learned this. Not only did, you learned most of it, some of it in law school, but you really got a crash course in it. And you really can do it, but finding little ways to cope with, like for me, like earplugs, so I didn't hear other people around me. That was kind of like, for me, it was just, I got to stay in my zone.
I think that tip's good for anyone who might be in school studying anything. That's a good tip.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the metaphorical earplugs, like from the start of studying. Don't listen to what other people are doing. Go at your own pace. Don't allow other people's stress to add to yours. There's enough during that time.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so let's switch gears and talk about estate planning a little bit. When you guys are thinking about estate planning, I think I hear quite often that, oh, I don't need it, I'm too young, I'll worry about that later. What do you say to people who are, kind of thinking that or saying that to you?
Yeah, I think something that we started our firm on, and something that was really important to us from the beginning, is thinking that estate planning is for everyone. So there's a lot of estate planning law firms that, have a certain minimum amount of assets that you need to have before they take you. We think that's ridiculous. You need to have even a simple, whether it's a ladybird deed over a house you own, simple will, anything that will help protect you no matter your age, no matter your circumstance in life. And especially if you don't have, let's say, like the, nuclear type family, that you want to leave your assets to somebody that is not somebody that would inherit under Florida law. It's important to put that kind of stuff in writing, even if you only have your car.
And even those like young and just starting their career, that's when you're starting to build wealth. Like that's the perfect time to set up, a possible revocable trust, because it can be amended easily throughout the rest of your life. You can, then you can add to your, aspects of it for your children. And when you have children, or if you don't have children, it's still, you can grow it with you as you grow, as you build, more assets and your career grows, things like that. And, so we don't necessarily recommend it only to those that are now just approaching retirement. It's a great tool for the young, because of that exact reason. You're just starting off, and this is the great time to make sure that it's exactly how you want it.
Right, because when you pass away, someone's already grieving and dealing with your loss. You don't want to put the burden on them to have to decide, okay, now what do I do with your stuff? What do you want me to do? If you don't have that in writing and giving them clear instructions, it can be very difficult for a family member to figure that out after you've passed. If someone is preparing to meet with you, what are some things that you like for them to have ready so that it kind of makes that initial appointment or some consultation with you go a little bit smoother?
Yeah. So we offer free 30-minute consultations. So we really like to not put pressure on that first meeting. I think just knowing your goals broadly, if you're coming to us for estate planning purposes, knowing what you want to do with your things, what you are envisioning after you pass, things like that. If you're coming to us for probate, really having an understanding of what the assets are of the person that's passed away, and then what documents they might have had in place or none. So it's really a low stress first initial meeting.
Yeah. And with also with a probate, like certain documents that we would already need would be, if there's a last will and testament in place, that's something that we need. Or even if they can't find the original, if they can have a copy, the death certificate, that's something that we would need initially as well. Those are just some documents that we need on the front end, but we kind of dig a little deeper to help them kind of figure out, what more information. We discuss that either in the consultation or once we move forward.
Okay. And for the listeners that may not know, what's the difference between estate planning and probate?
One is the front end and one is the back end. So estate planning is kind of proactive before someone passes away. So this is going to be like your typical last will and testament, but it's also a lot more. So that's where Nataly mentioned earlier, it's something called an enhanced life estate deed or a ladybird deed. That's like a very small little package, but it's a really big deal because it can protect your house or your property that you have in Florida.
Small but mighty.
Yeah. And then, but then also trusts or encompass estate planning. And people think those are daunting, but they're really just an alternative to a last will and testament, and a little more flexible and a little more detailed that you can kind of specify to how you want. And now versus probate on the back end is when somebody passes away, you have to go to the courts through the court system to be able to administer their estate. So this is where we take their last will and testament and we put it with the court and we distribute the assets. We go through the whole process to get those assets distributed in accordance with the will, or if there's no will, then in accordance with Florida state law.
Okay. So are you going to probate no matter how you set it up? It just one makes it a little bit easier if you have all your documents in place?
No. So like Jennifer mentioned, that there's a revocable trust. So that's actually a tool that we use to avoid probate. Yeah. There's others though. So sometimes people will come to us saying, I need a trust because I need to avoid probate. And when we kind of dig a little deeper, we can realize like, maybe you don't need a trust. Maybe you just need to add beneficiary designations on your accounts, a ladybird deed like Jennifer mentioned, and we're avoiding probate for a lot less than it would cost to create a trust. So I think it's about being proactive and creative with ways to avoid probate. And then a common misconception that we always see is that a last will and testament avoids probate. It does not. A last will and testament kind of ensures probate if all of your assets are in your own name. So I think just kind of having that conversation with our clients and seeing what is the best direction for them to take, either to avoid probate, or if it's not necessary and probate will be pretty simple, then there's no need to spend extra money to avoid it.
And we don't try to sell. That's something that's really important to us, is we don't sell clients these big estate plans when they don't need it. So that's why one of our smallest, services is a deed. And if that's all they need, that's all they need. And if they only need beneficiary designations, which is absolutely nothing for us, like we can't help you with that, you do it yourself, we'll guide them on that, because we want to be honest to these clients and not be the typical attorney or the one that's out to get you for all your money. Like that's not what we're looking for with our business. We're looking to actually help our clients.
Yeah, I think it goes back to estate planning for everyone.
Yeah Avoiding probate, getting the government to not touch your estate after you have passed away. So any way that we can avoid for them stepping in and telling your estate what to do is a good thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Good. What other advice could you give to someone who maybe doesn't quite understand, some of the, or if someone wants to go online and kind of do their own paperwork? Because I've seen some of those advertisements too. What are some pitfalls that they may not understand when they're just going to LegalZoom and filling out a document themselves and saying, okay, that's done?
Yeah,
that's a great question.
So I think for us, we are licensed in Florida. So Florida has so many little nuances. And one of those specifically is if you own a home and it's your primary residence, it's called your homestead. And there are so many little pitfalls that you can fall into with just homestead alone. Mm-hmm. So I think I've seen those documents before, and I've had, prospective clients that want to go that route instead. If anything, have an attorney review it if you want to do it. It's a lot less. I understand that these services exist and they exist to help people. Have someone look at it, pay the hourly rate to have an attorney review it for 1 hour, and just kind of know that peace of mind. Maybe you did it great and there's nothing that needs to be done, but at least you know.
And another thing even is the execution of the document is something else that can very easily be messed up. And if you don't execute it properly, it's not a valid will. And, there's also extra steps that you can do to avoid extra steps in court. So that's why there's layers to these things that an attorney will know versus, looking it up online. It's just like Nataly said, at least have an attorney review it for an hour of their time, because it will just make the whole process a lot simpler for your loved ones on the back end and make sure there's no mistakes.
Okay. And so when someone is setting up the estate planning documents, do they also need to go to their bank or investment accounts and like change titles? Like what do they do once they've set all those documents up with you to ensure that those other accounts are included and, properly executed should they pass?
Yeah, so it just depends on what the estate planning document is that they have. With a last will and testament, not usually, unless they're adding beneficiary designations to their account. I think a common thing that we've seen people do is add, either a child or somebody else to their account as a joint title owner. We sometimes advise against that. So it just depends on what it is that they're doing with a revocable trust. If they do want to move accounts into the trust, then it does need to be retitled. And something that we work to avoid this misconception is that just because it's retitled in the name of your trust doesn't mean it's not still yours. It is still 100% yours, and you still have full access to be able to change things in a revocable trust.
Very nice. All right. So one last piece of advice from each of you to someone who might be starting out on their journey, or, a mistake that you have seen from other people. Jennifer?
Something that we have from the beginning. So and kind of in line with also your podcast, it takes money to make money. So if we looking back, like if we had invested earlier on in some of these, a lot of technology and a lot of these things that, made it the business that we want, I think that would have been helpful. We're in more than 50% of year 3, and we finally have invested more money into these time-saving techniques, trying to be the CEOs and not just the having employees, a job, not the employees, because, from especially our first year, we just were employees to our firm. And I think that had we taken a little bit more, a little more courage and invested earlier on in a lot of these like things that are out there, I think that would have been helpful. That was definitely something that has improved and helped with our growth a lot.
Name one of those. What's one thing that you implemented that helped you?
Well, now we have a virtual assistant. That's extremely helpful. We file our deeds electronically. Before, we would go downtown. We would, have to go to the individual counties, which takes a while, especially when we have no, support staff. Because right now it's still, except now we have our virtual assistant, but it's just the two of us, in person here. Those are just two of the things. What else?
We've implemented case management software that has helped, automate a lot of what we do to an extent. So it's helped with our lead intake process. Just things, I think valuing your time from the beginning of starting a business is so important, because I don't think that we did that. I don't think that we thought, okay, it'll only take us 5 minutes to do this, let's just do it. 5 minutes adds up. And so when that becomes your entire day, I think, time to reevaluate and create the business that you want from the beginning. Make sure that you're establishing those procedures from the beginning, and invest wisely, of course, into your business. But if you can invest from the beginning into these tools to save you time, you will grow so mumuch faster.
Yeah, 100% agree. You need a team to build an empire. And so trying to do it by yourself, you're going to hurt yourself, and then you don't help people. So build that team around you. So I love that piece of advice. Okay, so I've got a fun question. Would love to hear each of you answer. If you could have a super talent or a superpower, what would it be and why?
For me, it would be teleportation for sure. It would be teleportation, just because I think, I waste so much time in the car driving from meeting to meeting. And if I could just show up, and, that would be kind of a lame one, but that would be my superpower.
Oh, but you could use it for vacations.
I know that too.
I want to be on the beach. For me, kind of is similar. Actually, I've always loved the idea of being able to control things with my mind, like telekinesis kind of. And it kind of goes to efficiency a little bit. Like I'd love to be having things around the house being done while I'm working, or, having something drafted up. I'll just have my keyboard going over here while I'm reading something over here. I don't know how it would work, but that would be something I would love to do. I think it would be just being able to control with my mind more.
We're efficient.
That sounds awesome. All right. So you guys mentioned a free consultation. If our audience wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
So you can reach us online at our website, rrlawpa.com. All of our social media channels are the same, at rrlawpa, or you can just email us, info@rrlawpa. We'll respond there.
Yay. Well, I appreciate you guys so much coming on and sharing your expertise in probate and estate planning.
Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it.
Awesome. That concludes another episode of Empower Her Money podcast. You need to take the information and actually implement it. It's the whole point of the podcast. So if you have any assets at all, you should be estate planning now. You're never too young. It's never too early. And reach out to Nataly and Jennifer, and they will gladly help you with all your estate planning needs. Thanks again, ladies.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Empower Her Money podcast. Make sure you leave me a 5-star review, share this podcast, subscribe, and share the message.